What's up, y'all? Welcome to another installment of the For the Gram podcast. This is a show where I, Jaksyn, your host, am going to dive into a topic of interest to me. It could be a current event, a hip trend, something that is generally interesting, and it's going to be a trend hip enough for the gram. This episode, I'm going to be discussing a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about movies. So ultimately, movies is something that has been a big part of my life. My family loves to go to movies. I love to go to movies. It's a grand old time. I just love movies in general. And now that I am sort of on a video arts track in school, movies have become more of a large part in my life. And so I thought, what better way to start with the first episode of this podcast than to talk about movies. A big thing to me when it comes to movies is it has to have like some level of quality to it in order for me to be able to sit through it on a time and time again basis. So movies and I go way back. The very first movie that I saw in theaters was the original Madagascar, which is crazy to me because I have so many DVDs that have the trailer for the original Madagascar, and it's weird because it has the classic Ben Stiller interview because he played Alex the Lion in the original DreamWorks Madagascar. But it's what we like to call now the actual actor jump scare. In theaters nowadays, there's often a message before the movie even starts from an actor in the movie that's like, thank you for coming to see our movie. And it's like, yeah, I get it. We paid a lot of money to be here, but like still, we don't need you reminding us that we're here to see a movie. We just want to watch the movie. You know what I mean? So like that's been a much bigger thing with a lot of the blockbusters nowadays. And so it's weird to see, like, I watched Top Gun Maverick. This was one of the first movies that I remember this whole thing happening for. And it was just because we had just got out of COVID and nobody had gone to see any movies for a long time. And so Tom Cruise just shows up at the beginning of the movie before Top Gun Maverick and he just goes, hey, thank you for coming to this movie. And we're like, well, okay. We knew we were going to see a movie with Tom Cruise in it, but we weren't expecting to see Tom Cruise this early in the movie. And he's also old now. Like, he wasn't 80s Top Gun Tom Cruise. It was 2022 Top Gun Maverick Tom Cruise. And so I was like, okay, this is a little much. But it's been a big thing with a lot of the like larger movies that has been coming out recently, and it's just, hey, everybody, come see the movie. Thank you for seeing this movie, like being a part of the theatrical experience. And a big thing that people are talking about nowadays is with the innovation of streaming services. Do people actually go see movies in the theaters anymore? I do. I've literally seen 3 movies in the past month. Like, it's like a part of my regular everyday routine to just be like, hey, what movies are in the theater today? Like, is there any good ones? Can I, like, watch a movie in the theater right now? So, the movie theater that I go to releases like kids movies because kids have nothing to do during the day in the summertime, and so there's a lot of times where I can go see a movie that I really liked from my childhood that I was too young to like appreciate in the theaters in the theater. And so there are some movies that I can just go to and be like, oh, I loved this movie growing up. Like, one that comes to mind is Kung Fu Panda. They re-released Kung Fu Panda 1 the summer before I went to college. So I went and saw Kung Fu Panda 1, which is one of my favorite movies from when I was a kid, and I enjoyed it so much. It was like me and my 4 siblings, and then like 2 other people were there. So it was great. We were just sitting in there quoting the movie with the movie, and it was a grand old time. We were not skipping a beat. Uguay in the theater is amazing. Tai Lung in the theater is amazing. Literally, Hans Zimmer's score Oh my goodness, it was such a good experience. I loved it so much. But I have a real soft spot for animated movies. Like 4 out of my top 10 movies of all time are probably animated. You got Kung Fu Panda, you got How to Train Your Dragon, you have Toy Story 1. I love the original Toy Story. Oh, it was so good. I watched it for the first time in my kindergarten class. We watched the first two, and then I remember Toy Story 3 came out later that year, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I could go see Toy Story 3. I've already seen the first two Toy Stories, and then it was really sad in the theaters because Toy Story 3 was also crazy for the sad factor. And then I don't even want to talk about Toy Story 4 right now. Ducky and Bunny, great. Key and Peele, love them. But everything else about that movie was just like, okay, do we really need this to be here? Like, Buzz was barely in it. I was really sad. And he went back to, like, Toy Story 2, where he's, like, having an identity crisis. Oh, it was weird. But, like, Jesse is a sideline character. Rex is a sideline character. All the funny characters are just sidelined. They're in the RV the whole time. If you haven't watched Toy Story 4 and you don't know what I'm talking about, maybe that's for the best. Who knows? Like, I am not a fan of movies that have extended their welcome. But going back to my 4 animated movies in my top 10, you got Kung Fu Panda, you got How to Train Your Dragon, you got Toy Story 1, and then you have the animated Robin Hood, Disney's animated Robin Hood. Oh, that was so good. I watched that movie so many times growing up. Oh, it was crazy. They're all like animals, and Robin Hood's a fox, and the sheriff is like a wolf, and Maid Marian is also a fox, and then there's whoever Maid Marian's lady in waiting is, she's just a giant chicken lady, and she just runs around like screaming all the time. Oh, it was such a good movie. And then there were the little kids, the little group of kids that reminded me of the Lost Boys from Peter Pan, but they were just like little scamps. There was like a couple rabbits, and then there was a turtle. He was cool. That probably is why I love Ninja Turtles so much, is just because there was a turtle in the animated Robin Hood, and so I just like turtles. He was a funny turtle too. He was like the smart one, and he had like glasses and stuff. But I'll talk about Ninja Turtles another day. I have a whole bunch of stuff for that. Theatrical experiences have changed a lot more as I've gotten older. I have my own money now. I have adult money, so I can actually like go see movies whenever I want to, instead of having my parents be like, well, we gotta go as a family, and there's like 7 of us, so it costs like $150 just to go to a movie, and it's really obnoxious actually, but like that's why we just bought a lot of DVDs, because you could spend $20 on a DVD instead of spending $150 a couple months before that. I'm 20 years old, so I'm able to go see rated R movies in theaters now, like without adult supervision, which is interesting because rated R movies have gone from 18 to 17, and then if you're younger than 17, you just need a parent's permission to go see it. A couple of my friends, the year COVID happened, they wanted to go see Birds of Prey, and one of them was 17, but the others were all going to turn 16. And so they don't, like, from my experience, they don't ID you for rated R movie tickets unless you look young or you look super suspicious. When my friends went to go see Birds of Prey, they all looked like, a couple of them were chill, but the other ones were just not looking like they knew what they were doing. Anyway, so they went, and they had to wait for one of their parents to show up so that they could buy the tickets, give them permission, and then they could go see the movie. I just thought that was funny. But like I said, I've seen probably 4 rated R movies in theaters in the 3 years I've been able to go see them without my parents. That was cool because I just buy my tickets online now and they just say, hey, remember, you can't buy tickets unless you're 17 or older. And I'm like, I know that. All of the rated R movies that I've seen in theaters are not that great. There's probably a certain target audience that I am not that would be suitable for a rated R movie. I went to see the only one that I will say that was good, that I think was really good, was Oppenheimer. I went to see that several times in theaters, which I'm not normally one to go see movies a bunch of times in theaters, but I saw that one more than once. I remember I saw Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I saw that one more than once just because my family wanted to go. The Ninja Turtles movie that just came out, I watched that one several times in the theaters. But if it's a movie that needs a theatrical experience, I will go more than once. If it's a movie that doesn't, I can just be like, oh, that was nice. I can go home and wait for it to come out on streaming in a couple months, and then I'll be able to watch it again. But it's interesting. One of the movies that I went to that was rated R was The Killers of the Flower Moon. It was a Scorsese film. I was a little distracted, though, just because I got hit with every single movie theater cliche you could think of. I went with a friend of mine, and there was someone who fell asleep. There was someone whose phone went off. There were people making out a couple seats over. Then they left, and then they didn't come back. I was like, oh, that's interesting. They just left their stuff here. And then the person who fell asleep, I was like, you just paid $13 to nap in a somewhat comfortable chair while a bright light is shining in your face. That's a good use of your money. But then, like, the floors were sticky. It was just not that great of an experience. It was a weird movie. Leonardo DiCaprio was playing a 25-year-old when he's 40-something. He's almost 50. That's crazy to think about. Like, he had a southern accent, which was not good. And then, like, it took place in Oklahoma, but it was, like, the story was good. I liked the story. Every now and again, they had a gunshot to keep you awake because it was 3.5 hours long, but the gunshots were very loud, and they had a lot of echo on them, too, which just kept you up and at them, you know, just making sure that you were paying attention. But I do enjoy a lot of the movies that I get to see in theaters just because the theatrical experience adds so much. If you get to go see a movie in theaters as opposed to watching it in your home, I mean, I would go 9 times out of 10 unless I had some fancy home theater space in my house that I could watch movies on just out of the blue. With like surround sound and stuff, but I don't have that. I probably should have that. That would be really cool. But at the same time, it's like I have a little bit of time to kill, so it's like I'll just go see the movie in theaters. It'll be great. And the theatrical experiences people say are dying just because COVID really wrecked a lot of that stuff. The last movie I saw before COVID shut everything down was Pixar's Onward, and I think Pixar really has suffered a lot from the lack of people going to theaters now, just because everything was streaming. I mean, a lot of companies are suffering from lack of theatrical attendance, but like Dune, I know, was just released on HBO Max when it was HBO Max, and it was just released there as well as in theaters, but you had to pay like Premier Access to see it or something like that. That was another thing people tried to do, was they had like a fee that you could pay to watch the movie at your house during like the theatrical releases. But Pixar, they had 3 movies that went straight to streaming that would have done pretty well in theaters, I think. They had Soul, which was the movie about the jazz pianist who died, basically. And then there was Turning Red, which was the one about the girl from Canada who turns into a red panda. And then there was Luca, which was a sea monster who wanted nothing more than to compete in a triathlon and live with people. And it was great. Those were all really good movies, but they were just released to streaming. So not a lot of people got to witness what these movies were. But I think another big thing with that is they need people to see their original content. There's not another original Pixar film set to come out until next summer, I don't think. So summer of 25. But like that one's going to be a big deal too, because if they do well with that one, then they might stop giving us crappy sequels to a bunch of movies that don't need sequels. Like, in my opinion, you don't need a Toy Story 5 unless it's a prequel to the first one. Like, what happened to Andy's dad? I would love to hear that story, but they're probably not going to give it to us. They're going to give us some, like, Andy passing Woody down to his kids or something like that, and I'm not interested in that story as much. People want another Finding film, like Finding Nemo, Finding Dory, which I think would be interesting. I just don't know what story they would tell with it. I didn't like Finding Dory all that much. I did like the sea lions. The sea lions were funny. Ty Burrell as a beluga whale, oh, that was also funny. But, like, if we get an Inside Out 3, I'm like, okay, how much can we milk out of Pete Docter before he ends his term with Pixar? There's a bunch of things up in the air, and so I just really hope that they don't give us a bunch of meaningless sequels, like Incredibles 3. Like, there could be another Incredibles movie, and I'm like, why would you do that? The second one wasn't that good in the first place. The villain was easy to spot. The story happened way too quickly. The pacing was all off. But, like, you don't need a third one unless you're going to fix what you did with the second one, like in Cars. Like, Cars 1 was pretty good. I think it's a top 10 Pixar movie. Cars 2 was, the concept was, James Bond had a cool car. Let's make a movie about that. Let's make Mater a spy. And then Cars 3 was back to McQueen. And so that was a good way to end it. And if you watch Cars 1 and Cars 3 back to back, it's almost as if no time passes and Pixar just tried to erase Cars 2 from existence. Other than that, it's like you don't need any more at all, just because people have limits, and I get it, like the characters are there, but if the story's not good, you're gonna lose a lot of people, because that was the thing that Pixar did better than anybody else. They did twist villains better than anybody else, but now, like, every studio is doing twist villains. But they did that, and then they had story, and they had emotion better than anyone else. Like, I just watched If in theaters, which was a John Krasinski film, but the premise behind that was he wanted to make a live-action Pixar film, and so he brought in the composer who wrote all of the heart-pulling, tear-jerking scores for Pixar, and he had him compose a score for his movie. And so it's like the music moved people so much in If that, like, it would be the same result as in Up. Like, the first 10 minutes of that movie is just an emotional roller coaster. And then you have Inside Out also, which is, like, on a whole nother level, because it's, like, human relatability and things like that. Any movie that has pulled at your heartstrings a little bit from Pixar is probably a Pete Docter film, for one. He's from Minnesota. That's kind of cool. He's from Bloomington, if you didn't know. He has a very good way of telling stories that are relatable to people that are watching it, but also makes you feel a certain way, which is a really cool thing about like a theatrical experience. Is you're sitting in a room of people who are feeling very similar things to you, and you're like 3 inches away from them, but you don't realize that they're going through the same thing. Sometimes you do. Sometimes there's like big crowd reactions and stuff like that. But another thing is that people do feel a lot of the same things when they're watching movies. And that's always really cool to see. Another big theatrical reaction that I can remember is I watched both Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame in theaters with one of my best friends from high school, and we still talk about the fact that when the big climactic event happened in Infinity War, he was ready to throw the chair he was sitting in across the theater. I had a blast listening to him just rant about throwing this chair when his favorite heroes were just disappearing at the end. He and I still talk about that sometimes. But then in Endgame, when the big fight scene happens at the end, we were both right there with him on the edge of our seat. We were cheering. It was such a good experience because we had seen both of them together, that it was just a nice experience. We got to see the whole 4.5 hour complete story when we were both just sitting to the left or the right of each other, and that was really cool. Something that I want to talk about specifically with movies is rating movies. There's the one rating database that everybody knows, and that's Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes is like a huge selling point for movies. If it does good on Rotten Tomatoes, people are generally going to go see that movie. If it does bad on Rotten Tomatoes, people generally won't go and see that movie. I like to play with the odds a little bit, and I tend to go see movies that don't have the greatest Rotten Tomatoes score, just because there's a way to figure out if it's actually a credible score or not. And it's, if you go to the website, it tells you how many critics reviewed it. If it's a high number and it's a low percentage, then don't go. But if it's a low number of critics and a low percentage, then it might be worth it, just because a lot of critics just kind of passed it over just to be like, oh, nobody is really talking about this movie. I don't need to go watch it and review it for this website. So Thor: The Dark World, which is the second Thor movie, that one came out and it got a 64% on Rotten Tomatoes. And then Thor: Love and Thunder, the fourth one, came out and that one got 62. So that one got worse than the lowest rated Marvel film on Rotten Tomatoes, and so I did not go see that. I still, to this day, have not seen Thor: Love and Thunder. I'm not planning on seeing it because I don't think it's going to be worth the watch. I think Christian Bale will do great. I think Chris Hemsworth will do great, but I will not see that movie. I don't have any inclination to go see it. I just don't want to see it. And I know it's free on Disney Plus. I don't want to see it. It's not something that interests me all that much, and so therefore I'm just not going to. But something that is on the rise a little bit is this app called Letterboxd, and it's basically social media for movie lovers. I think one day it's going to surpass Rotten Tomatoes as the way people like judge movies before they go and see them. But right now, it's just a place for people to rate movies, that they loved from their childhood, people to watch movies while they're on certain substances. That is the one downside that I see to Letterboxd right now. So basically, with Rotten Tomatoes, it's a scale of 1 to 10, and you just have a mean percentage of how many critics said this movie is going to be good. With how Rotten Tomatoes works, there's 3 ranks. There's the rotten, there's fresh, and there's certified fresh. So every critic will go and review the movie, and then they will rate it one of those 3 things. And the percentage that you see as the Rotten Tomatoes score is the percentage of critics that voted it certified fresh. So that's the top one. So if it's a 70%, that means 7 out of 10 critics, 70 out of 100 critics is going to say that that movie is worth going to see. If it's a 98%, that means 98 out of 100 people said it's worth going to see. If it's 2%, that means 2 out of 100 people said it was worth going to see. Makes sense? So with how Letterboxd works, is it is a 1 to 5 star thing. And so every movie has its own like profile on there, and then you go and you click it, and then you can click the rate button, and you can just rank it on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, and you can see what other people are saying about it. You can see reviews, you can see the cast, you can see the crew, you can see a lot of those things, and then you can see the mean bell curve of the star ratings from everybody else. So one movie that I am currently going to look into is a movie that I just saw in theaters called The Fall Guy, which is a movie with Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, and Ryan Gosling is a stuntman. So I rated that movie 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was very good. One of my friends rated that movie 4.5 out of 5 stars. I can see that. Everybody that I follow, everybody that I'm friends with, I can see their ratings before I see anybody else's. I can also see if they want to watch the movie instead of rated it and things like that. But the mean score for this movie is 3.5 stars. I think it is 100% a you must see it in the theaters type of a movie. It is a little too late for that because I don't know if it's still in theaters anymore. But it was a love story to the stunt community, and I enjoyed it very much. And so the mean score for this one, there is 121,000 people who rated it 4 stars. And then 112,000 people who rated it 3.5 stars. So that's where you get that 3.5 mark generally from. One of the downsides to Letterboxd that I think can easily be improved is there's no release dates on there. So if there's a movie that you want to see and you don't know when it's going to come out, you just have to look that up because it's not in the app. You have to look up when it releases, and you have to look up what it's rated. I would really think that adding a rating feature to Letterboxd would be very helpful, just because there are some movies that aren't as advertised. Like, there was a horror movie from a small studio in Australia. I think it was called Talk to Me. That one, I saw no trailers for it. I just saw it on Letterboxd. I just saw it on people's watch lists and things like that. But I didn't know what it was rated, so I didn't know what it was going to be like in the theaters. And so I didn't go see it in theaters. I still haven't seen it. I really want to. It looks really cool. That's just one thing that I think Letterboxd can adjust slightly, just so then people can see that sort of a thing. Another cool thing about Letterboxd is you can add all these movies to a watch list. And so anytime you want to watch a movie, you can just go to your watch list and you can scroll through and see what one you're feeling. I've done that many a times just because there's so many options, and I often find myself just scrolling through streaming services for like 20 minutes before I actually decide on a movie, and then by that time I don't have time to watch it, and that's unfortunate. Another thing that I like to do instead of just scrolling through my watch list on Letterboxd is I just go to a random category on a streaming service. I just go to a random category on, say, Netflix, and I ask someone for a number, and I just go over that many movies, and I click whatever one it is, no questions asked, and I watch it. That's how I watched Treasure Planet for the first time. That was one that I was like, oh, this is interesting. I've never seen this. I just went on Disney Plus, and I was like, throwbacks, here we go. And then I went over a certain amount, and then I watched Treasure Planet, and I loved it. It was really good. It's a very underrated Disney movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's worth it. It's well worth it. It's a very underrated movie from like the Disney Forgotten Age, and I love a lot of those movies from that time of Disney, like Atlantis, Treasure Planet, Brother Bear. Brother Bear is one of my favorite movies. I quote that movie endlessly. It's a really good movie. Yeah. So I think ultimately Letterboxd is going to overtake Rotten Tomatoes eventually, just when it gets a little bit more credibility. So like you'll still have your IMDb's to go find cast lists and things like that, but I think Letterboxd is gonna take the world by storm in the next couple of years, just because right now it is just for film nerds. A lot of media people love this app. Like hundreds of thousands of people are using it, and I think it's gonna take off soon if it hasn't already. And with that, I think it's time for the annual segment of 3 Things You Need to Know. So last week we did 3 Things You Need to Know for the first time, and I think I'm going to try it again to see how it goes, because I liked doing it, and I found some good ones that I could talk about now. I tried to keep it movie themed just along with the episode, but I found some good ones. So number 1 on 3 Things You Need to Know this week is that Inside Out 2 just passed Dune 2 as the highest grossing movie of 2024. Yes, it is only July, and we're only halfway through 2024, and a movie has sold more tickets than Dune, which was released early on in the year, and nobody thought it was going to be passed. I honestly thought it was going to stay for at least a little bit longer, but Inside Out 2 has been out for 2 weeks, and it already passed Dune 2. And I just think that's because kids can watch it, so families are going to see Inside Out 2, so you get way more box office numbers from people just going to see that movie, as opposed to seeing Dune 2, which is people who just really liked the first Dune, or people who just heard the score, because the score is really good. The poster design was really cool. The cinematography was amazing. The cast is stacked as ever. I wonder if people like thought about this when I wonder if people thought like this when Empire Strikes Back came out, the second Star Wars film, like chronologically released. Because I honestly think that Dune is the Star Wars of our generation, even though our generation has Star Wars still. But it was a really good movie nonetheless, and props to Inside Out 2 for taking it over. Number 2 is there's a new Hunger Games book that is going to be released next year in March, called Sunrise on the Reaping, which is going to be about the second Quarter Quell, which is the 50th Hunger Games, and that is the one where they had twice the amount of tributes from every district. If you're not a Hunger Games fan, I apologize, but I am. I was a little behind on that, but I really, really enjoy The Hunger Games. I think it's the best book to movie adaptation of any piece of media ever. But there's going to be a Sunrise on the Reaping movie released in November of 2026. The book hasn't even come out yet, and they've already greenlit a movie. Like, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out about a year and a half after the book. So I'm not surprised, honestly, but I am, like, interested to see how the movie is going to look, just because they do have limited source material right now because the book's not released, but they do know they're gonna make it into a movie. So I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see who they cast as young Haymitch. That's gonna be interesting. I want to see who they cast as Snow, because the actor who played President Snow, he just died. He was 88 years old, and oh my goodness, I think his name was Donald Sutherland, and he just recently passed away, and it was really sad, because he was known for his roles on MASH and in The Hunger Games, obviously. But he died at 88 a couple days ago, and it was like big news in the Hollywood world. Yeah, Donald Sutherland is his name. But he just passed away, and it's really sad because it's kind of getting to the end of an era a little bit. Like, I think Morgan Freeman, he's also like really old. I think he's 87. He might be 88 as well, but he has looked the same the whole time I've been alive. He has looked exactly the same. He has not changed his facial features. But I saw a video of him walking out of a building into his car, and he actually did look like he was 88 years old. Like, he was getting to the end of his life, which is really sad, because like, he is probably one of the most recognizable voices in all of Hollywood, and it's going to be a shame when he doesn't get to do anything else, because Morgan Freeman is just such a helpful person to the cinema industry, and he's done so many things, but he will be missed when he's gone too. But yeah, it's kind of sad that age is catching up to some of these people, and they're just not going to be able to do what they love to do anymore. And then number 3 is movies have often been partnering with the cinemas, and they've been releasing novelty popcorn buckets for their movies. They used to do popcorn buckets for movies all the time, but I think Dune 2 really reignited this popcorn bucket design fad with the sandworm in the lid of the popcorn bucket. But the problem is, it's like, who's eating large popcorns when they go to the movies unless they buy this bucket? Like, I don't even finish a small bucket of popcorn when I go to the movies, let alone a large bucket of popcorn. It's kind of insane. But the most recent one that was just revealed was actually kind of cool. So Despicable Me 4 is being released in July. So July 3rd, they'll release Despicable Me 4. And there's a new novelty popcorn bucket to go with this movie, and it's themed around the Minions. So it's the Minions overalls in like a baby carrier type thing, and the popcorn bucket is in the pocket of this like reverse backpack, and it fits a large bucket of popcorn, and it's like just a baby carrier. And because Gru has a baby in this one, so like, you can fit a lot of popcorn just on your chest. And so that's an interesting concept for one. I know the Wolverine and Deadpool one is getting a lot of interesting light on the internet, but like these popcorn buckets are actually kind of creative in like a new version of the sense, because I remember one of the I remember when I was younger, my family would get a popcorn bucket, and it would renew every year, and you paid for a new one every year, and then you just got to go to a bunch of movies with this same popcorn bucket, and you could just bring it back and refill it and pay to refill it, and then you could go watch your movie. And then you could just go watch your movie and enjoy your popcorn, and it was great. But I like to see that they're doing some of these things that aren't just the tin popcorn buckets anymore. They're trying to go outside the bucket a little bit, if you know what I'm saying by that. Just because the designs do often extend out a little bit from just the bucket, which is kind of cool. I think it's a really cool idea. I think it's something that people should have been doing for a long time. But I also think it's just a way of getting people to buy more concessions, because that's ultimately what the movies is you go and you watch movies and you pay for snacks, and you know it's going to be expensive, but you just tough it out and you go anyway, and it's an amazing experience. And then you sit back at home and you go, I just spent this much money on snacks and a ticket to go sit in a room for 3 hours. But it's great. It's great. I think it's going to be cool. I might buy one, honestly, just to say that I have it. But I did buy a bunch of so my movie theater does snacks themed on the movies. So they did churros for a movie recently. They had a pizza themed after Garfield. That was kind of cool. And so I will often partake in those, but I don't often partake in the popcorn buckets. So I might actually have to pay for one of these. Who knows? Who knows what's even going to happen? What movies am I going to go see in July? I don't know. Well, anyway, you guys, that's going to do it for 3 things you need to know. Inside Out 2 passed Dune 2 in box office sales. Sunrise on the Reaping is getting a movie in November of 2026 after the book is released in March of 2025. And the Despicable Me 4 popcorn bucket has been revealed. And so I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of the For the Gram podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. It really means a lot to me. If you have any feedback on the show, or you just want to suggest a thing for what I should talk about, I do have an Instagram at forthegrahampod, all lowercases, no spaces. And I do have an email address at forthegrahampod@gmail.com. So those are going to be linked in the description below if you're interested in. Thank you all for tuning in into this week's episode of For the Gram. And if you have any feedback, you know where to leave it. But in that case, I'll see you all in the next episode.